Young athletes with big stories. These sports stories are here to motivate, equip, and enlighten the next generation. You're listening to an Echo Sports production. Here's your host.
Hey everybody, Edwin Glosson here with our Echo Sports High School Hoops podcast, Boys Edition, and I'm here with my guy, Tim Littlefield, evaluator with Great American Shootout. Tim, thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here, Edwin. I've known you for a long time. I appreciate what you do for kids. You've been plugged in for a pretty good while now, on both sides of it, so you definitely have an understanding of what it really takes to help not only get kids to the next level, but also educate people who are trying to get into this, as they move forward.
I really appreciate that, Tim. I'm really excited about talking hoops with you today, and folks that are watching, just get used to this because we're going to continue to put some good content out here for you when it comes to boys basketball. So just the beginning of what Tim and I are going to do together. So Tim, when we're getting into this, talking today, I think the first thing, let's just talk about just the Kingston Fielding snub from the McDonald's All-American game. I know I was personally shocked just by his body of work. What he's done at the high school level is also what he's done on circuits and what he's done with Team USA playing 3v3 and winning a gold medal there and all that stuff. You talk about, just for people that may not know, what goes into the selection process of becoming a McDonald's All-American?
It's a complicated process to kind of put it in simple terms. It's a complicated process from the standpoint of playing in front of the right people seeing you a number of different times in certain scenarios. So the question will be, okay, well, who are the right people? And I think from a checking the box standpoint, I thought he did that, for the longest time period. His organization with the SA Future was an independent organization, but they were blessed with an opportunity to go out and get a shoe deal to play on the Puma circuit. And so that kind of helped him play in front of some other profile athletes. But not only that, even from an independent standpoint, the coaching staff over with the SA Future and even with Brennan High School had put these guys in really, really credible situations to play in front of who they needed to play in front of and be seen and play against, a credible schedule and then against some credible opponents. So from that standpoint, like you mentioned before, the body of work, that part of it was kind of done, even to the point where they've played against some of the kids who were in the conversation of potentially being McDonald's All-Americans, and he outperformed them. When you start looking at a body of work, I think what is understated or underappreciated is how you elevate others. I think, his ability to what he brings to the table and how he elevates others around him makes him a complete player. And I don't think, based on what I see and how the process has been going, I don't know if that's really valued as much as it needs to be. I think what he does translates well to the next level. And then beyond, I've talked to some professional people about his game. I've talked to other high school coaches and college coaches about his game and the things that they like about him. And it's very little that they don't like. I was actually out of the game last night, and a high school coach who I was actually going to go see was just totally baffled that this kid did not get that opportunity. So it's not just something that we are saying here in this particular forum, but it's people that are echoing it across the state because they're starting to see some sort of a pattern. I don't know if it's just with Texas in general or the Scholastic situation, just because, we'd had this conversation before about, the nominees being prep heavy and different things of that nature. But I don't feel like, you have to be a prep kid. Some kids can get it done at their scholastic schools that they're, currently at, whether it be public and or private. I just think it comes down to what we talked about before, which is a body of work. And even from a ranking standpoint, he's 20th in the country. There's 24 bids that go out for nominees. And I think, he recently was up as maybe high as 12 or 13 or 14, but recently dropped, I guess, because some people had reclassified or whatnot. So I get that. But at the other part of it, though, is just, the company that he's kept. He did USA basketball, U17. He was one of the final cuts in that situation there. And I think that should have had some consideration based on the fact of how well he performed in that particular arena. He performed well even at top 100, NBA top 100 camp. out in Orlando, over the summertime, against another credible list of kids, from classes of all the way from 25 all the way down to 27s, and so he did what he needed to do. I think it's just more of a political thing that, some people are going to have to take a deep dive and take a look at to see why he wasn't chosen when I think he was a prime candidate.
So, here's a couple questions that I have in regards to just when we're talking about the political side of it. When it comes to his body of work, how big of a factor do you think that he was a public school kid from San Antonio, Texas, played into or worked against him, so to speak? Now, I know that Coach Kogel and his staff do a fantastic job. They went out to Maryland and they played top-notch competition. But in general, do you think that played a factor? And if so, how much?
Again, I don't think you can really kind of penalize, although it could have been a potential factor just because they weren't seeing the consistency of the competition level. Sometimes there may be questions raised as far as, well, who is he doing it against? But then again, like you alluded to, going out to Maryland in years past, they've gone out to Hoop Fest and played in a number of different events, and he's performed well. From an individual standpoint, playing on the Puma circuit, they played against a number of quality opponents, and he's performed well. I mean, there has been very few times, if any, that he has not answered the call when they've played in a high-profile situation. I won't throw anybody under the bus, but I know there was a particular event that adjusted certain matchups that didn't allow Brennan to play against who they were going to be able to play against. Because they were a Nike organization. Brennan, for the most part, has the majority of their kids on the Puma circuit. And so they just didn't want that matchup to occur for, in my opinion, political reasons. So that way, there was no upstaging of a Puma team potentially beating a Nike team or something to that degree. So those type of things are going on behind the scenes. So that way, sometimes kids don't get those opportunities. And that's why you have sometimes kids searching for other opportunities to be able to be on that stage to try to be able to prove themselves versus it being more upfront and you play who you play and how you perform is what you are recorded by.
I personally think it's refreshing. Nothing against the young men that choose to go to the prep school route. If that's what you feel is best for you, what your camp thinks is best for you, hey, go out and do that. But I think it's refreshing to see a kid stay within their community, representing their community and doing something special within their community the way Kingston did. I think it should be rewarded, not penalized, but hey, it is what it is. But shifting gears to another element of that part of it, you talked about the shoe contracts. Do you think the fact that some of those voters were Nike, or they may be a part of the Nike camp from running a Nike program or having some allegiance with Nike, and him being a Puma kid also might have played a factor against him being named as a McDonald's All-American?
Nike is out in front of it all, and when I say that, they have a lot of power based on the contracts that they shell out, the athletes who they represent, and so from that regard, they're kind of out in the front. And so a lot of times, based on the EYBO circuit, I mean, there's no question about it that is the elite level. But then when you start talking about the others, Adidas has a number 2 player in the country. And so how do you say Adidas is not worthy of more visibility and or credibility than, say, Nike? So I think it varies just based on where kids are playing at. But we all know, the EYBL has been it for some time now, and others are catching up to a degree, or at least, being credible enough to be in the conversation. But when you look at Nike, the breakdown of the selections was Nike had 13 kids on there. Adidas had 9. And Under Armour had 3. And then I think there was 1 independent and then 1 other that may have come from like another affiliate of some sort. But with that being said, again, Nike being out in the forefront, they're the guys, who have a lot of say. You have a lot of guys who are potentially behind the scenes shaking hands. Hey, make sure you take care of my kid in this situation. Make sure you take care of my kid. And not saying that any of those kids are not deserving. because they are. I mean, they are, who they are, and they're in the conversation for a reason. But again, it should not be dominated by based on who you're around or who you're shaking hands with, all the time. When you start looking at the top two guards in the country the last 2 years from a collegiate standpoint, they both went to scholastic schools. You look at Tristan Newton, who's a two-time champion at UConn. He's out of El Paso, Texas. That transferred into UConn from I'm drawing a blank on the school that he was actually at. It'll come back to me here in a second. But my point in saying that is that he was at East Carolina, I'm sorry. Started out at East Carolina. So he goes to East Carolina and then obviously does well there, well enough for UConn and Hurley and his staff to say, hey, we need this kid. So he comes over. He's a two-time champion. He's in the Naismith conversation, Player of the Year, Bob Cousy Award nominee. The other one behind him, Jamal Shedd, Manor High School, goes to U of H. And none of those guys wavered from the process. Jamal Shedd goes into Manor, leads them to a state tournament, goes to U of H, plays sparingly, his freshman year. And then his sophomore year, he was kind of given the keys. Some of it was due to injury, but then some of it was him just coming in and just really working and showing that he was an established player that just needed some time on the floor and growing the system because others were performing well around him. And we're talking about kids who, again, from an independent standpoint, that once they got out in the forefront, the nation said, oh, wow, they're at this status here. Kingston is in that same category.
So another question another thing I noticed glaringly, there were no Texas kids on this year's McDonald's All-American roster. I mean, Texas basketball, I know it's recognized by so many as a football state, but basketball in Texas is phenomenal. What are your thoughts?
It's the new Mecca.
Excuse me?
It's the new Mecca, in my opinion, because when you start to look at it, you look at Tyrese Maxey and what he's doing with the 76ers. You look at De'Aaron Fox and what he's doing, now with the San Antonio Spurs. You look at a number of guys, you look at Jordan Clarkson and the way he's performed, with his career. And I mentioned him, being from San Antonio, being a Texas kid. But there's a number of others, that are on NBA rosters throughout. And then when you even go and look at the collegiate rosters, a lot of transfers are coming out of Texas. And so I just think that for whatever reason, they didn't take a deep dive into it. Last year was Trey Johnson and was Lynn McNeely. Lynn McNeely is one of the leading scorers, if he's not the leading scorer at UConn. He was at John Paul in Dallas. And then Trey Johnson, who's at Texas now, was at Lake Highlands. Those kids were no-brainers. They were going regardless. They're that talented. They were that good. I didn't think that they needed necessarily to go to prep. I know obviously they went for preparation purposes or maybe from, like we talked about before, being able to compete on a more consistent level. But the ability that some of those kids had, even as early as like the 8th or 9th grade, they were already going to going in that direction.
Again, a lot to unpack or dive into when it comes to the McDonald's All-American snub of Kingston Flemings. Again, thought you both feel he's very deserving. Put forth a strong body of work on the club side as well as on the scholastic side of it. But I know that him heading to Houston, he's got big things ahead of him. Let's shift gears, though, and talk about some 2025s who are worthy of a good look from some colleges. Tim, I'm just curious, who are some guards that college coaches need to be looking at a little bit deeper as the 2024-2025 season starts to come to a close?
Kid that I really like out of Lake Travis High School, Adrian Mathis. He is a very, very high IQ kid, smart point guard, has the ability to score it at all levels, very shifty, creates space for himself, and then he also has the ability to make really, really good reads. He's really good in transition. He's really good. And even in half-court situations, he can run a set, he can run an offense, he can get guys open. But on the flip side of that, he's a willing defender. I've seen him dig in and have to guard, some of the team's better players. And so he has that ability to obviously, go on the opposite end and be able to get a stop. So I really like what he brings to the table. He's a very credible kid, leading his team right now. I think they're second in district So they're going to be in a situation where they're in the playoffs. So it'll be good to see them in that light and seeing him going against some other quality guards, in the area. So he's one.
And one thing I love about Adrian Mathis's game, also on the defensive end, is really smart help defender. He does a really good job of reading shoulders and really reading eyes of offensive players and getting in those passing lanes. So definitely agree with you on that one. Who's another guard that some college coaches should take a deeper dive into?
Yeah, kid that I think hadn't gotten enough notoriety or exposure right now is a kid out of Southwest High School. I'm going to say Trey Martin. He's 6'2", 6'3", really long, wiry, athletic kid who can put it on the floor, 3-level scorer. Kind of gets overshadowed sometimes based on the district they played in and then the circuit he played on. Played with a really good Unbreakable team that he played with over the summertime. But prior to that, playing with Southwest High School, he was a key piece to them, going to the regional tournament last year. And he's also a key piece to them going back to the playoffs this year. He's a kid that can defend 2 or 3 different positions. He's a willing rebounder. But as I alluded to before, he's a 3-level scorer, can go out and really go get things done from a variety of ways.
Good call on that one. And can you give us any San Antonio products that are guards that some college coaches should be looking at?
I really like Cam Cowgill. We talked a lot about Kingston Fleming just a moment ago from his situation, being a McDonald's nominee. But his partner in crime, if you will, is Cam Cowgill. Those kids have grown up together. They've been playing together since maybe 3rd or 4th grade. And Cam Cowgill is, as advertised, he comes off the bus with plenty of range, can really, really shoot it, but he's not just a shooter. He's a kid that is savvy enough to keep the ball in his hand, understand reads, and get the ball kind of where it needs to be. He's crafty enough to create separation for himself, but then he's also a willing passer to put it on the money. So I've seen him in multiple situations. He's a legit 6'4", 190 pounds now. I had the chance to watch them, a couple of times this year in some credible games. And his size alone, his ability to get his shot off really, really quick bodes well for him. And I wish, college coaches would really kind of pay attention to his attributes and what he brings to the table.
He's a kid, too, that I think is just really you kind of betting on himself, not committing early. I know he has some opportunities now, but really shooting really well. Didn't he have an MVP outing at a pretty strong tournament already? I know I watched him play in person 2 weeks ago. Was impressed with just the way that he obviously can shoot the basketball, but he can put it on the floor for a 1 or 2 dribble pull up, get to the rack when he needs to. So he's crafty to be able to create space to finish there. And like you said, I think he's a very underrated passer with his IQ, being able to find open teammates. You have any other guards in the San Antonio area that need to be paid attention to?
I'd say Cam Garza, over at John Jay. Nobody's really kind of talking about the roster that they've really kind of put together. But Cam Garza is a kid that can play on the ball and off the ball. He's a kid that can really, really shoot it. But then he's also a kid that has the body type from a point guard standpoint to kind of get downhill, play through contact, can avoid defenders. He does a really, really good job of handling the basketball, getting away from defenders, and also making the right reads. He's very aggressive defensively, and he's also a competitive kid. Really, really hard-nosed type. I've seen him at TABC over the summertime playing with the John Jay group, get injured. But actually, because it was such a high-profile game, him being the leader of that particular team, he's the heartbeat of it and the soul of it. So he goes out, and he playing injured, but still was able to go out and deliver, 2 solid performances in front of some pretty good competition.
Now let's shift gears and let's talk about some forwards or some wings. Who are 2 wings that you think that garner more attention than they're getting right now?
I definitely would pay closer attention to Kenji Franklin at Bastrop Cedar Creek, and I would also pay closer attention to Darryl Banks over at San Antonio Johnson. Both have 4-3 capabilities, and when I say 4-3, it's probably in that order. From a standpoint of what they bring to the table, with first and foremost with their length. Both stand at about 6'6" or better. With really good size, really good frames on them. They could probably stand to add, maybe another 10 or 12 pounds or so just to be able to play still at a high level. Both of them are really athletic. Both of them do a really good job of creating separation, 15 and in, doing some different things off the dribble, attacking defenders. Darryl has the ability to stretch the defense and really scored, from 3. but also has the capability of even also handling the basketball to alleviate pressure. So, with him having his perimeter skills, translates well for him. Would like to see him, be a little bit more dominant, but he has the ability to be able to do it. It's kind of just being put in those situations. His team right now has been undefeated in district, so they've kind of figured some things out over like the last 8 or 9, 10 games or so, and really kind of figured out their approach as a team. They have some really good pieces with that group, but he is a key piece to that, and the reason why they're district champions right now. When you talk about Kenji, Kenji is a versatile kid. Can really put it on the floor. He poses a lot of problems just because of his size. Can shoot over the top of you. Like we talked about before, being a lefty, sometimes creates opportunities for himself just because sometimes, people may not realize that from a scout report standpoint. And then he's kind of out in front of you doing some really good things as well.
I definitely like Kenji's ability to really rebound the basketball, really strong on the glass for Cedar Creek. And I really like Daryl Banks' polish, like you said, can stretch the floor, can get downhill, like his bounce in regards to getting up and attacking at the rim. Well, Tim, thank you so much for taking the time to talk hoops with me today. Look forward to talking hoops with you again as we talk more about Texas prospects, teams making a deep run in the upcoming playoffs, as well as what we have coming up for the spring with Gasso.
Okay, all right. Appreciate the time.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. Visit us online at echosports.org for more information.